Hey, what's going on, my friends of AL.com? So thankful that you joined us this morning as we head into week 5 of the college football season. I'm Lauren Sisler with AL.com, joined by Mike Rodak to break things down. Alabama defeating Southern Miss, the final score 63-14. Next up, number 1 Alabama. They host number 12 Ole Miss. It's going to be a fun one. We'll get into that in a moment, but first and foremost, Mike, you obviously were there at the stadium. I know you and I were talking before this, not a ton of things to get into, but let's bring some excitement to things. And we talk about the offense and some of the spark and the offensive firepower. Let's talk about the rise and the fall. Whose stock is rising and whose stock is falling? And why not start with our main man, Jameson Williams, who is doing big things, because in my opinion, his stock continues to whoop, whoop, whoop.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, that was probably the case after the opening game of the season, too, against Miami when he had that 94-yard touchdown and kind of fell off a little bit against Mercer, had that penalty and the drop, and didn't really have the same explosiveness against Florida. And coming out of that Florida game, Nick Saban was really talking about finding more explosion in the offense, finding players who can bring what they used to have the last couple of years. And I mean, candidate number 1 is Jameson Williams because of his speed. That's why they went out and got him in the transfer portal from Ohio State. And we saw it not only in offense with the long 80-yard touchdown against Southern Miss, but also with the 2 kickoff returns. So that's a player who I think when you talk about trying to replace Devontae Smith or trying to replace Henry Ruggs and Judy and these guys who are so dynamic and such big difference makers for him the last year, he's the guy who I think is going to become more and more featured in this offense as we head forward. And that's really what Nick Saban wants. But it's not just him. We saw a little bit of changing around the offense, I would say, compared to the first 3 games. We saw more Jaleel Billingsley than we had seen in the first 3 games. And a guy who I think is, I don't love the term, but the doghouse is kind of where he was the first 3 weeks. And he seems like he's getting more in favor of Nick Saban right now. And
I was about to say, maybe those pep talks that Saban's been giving him on the sidelines have been more positive, right?
Yeah, and he's just a more athletic player than what they have at tight end. Even Cameron Latu's had a good season and certainly has emerged as an option there, had the touchdown, really, I guess the 2 touchdowns. He picked one up on the fumble the other night, but Billingsley's still the better athlete and still the guy who I think they want out there more to create mismatches. And we did see him more in early game action, not just kind of late in the game when the backups are in. And I think that will continue going forward. Also, JoJo Earle, the freshman, starting over Slade Bolden was notable to me as well, because that's a guy who they keep talking about trying to get more and more involved with the offense because of his explosive ability. So you talk about guys who are rising again: Billingsley, Williams, and Earle as well. And on the flip side, I would say Slade Bolden's role seems to be decreasing a little bit, just not really quite providing that slot presence I would have expected coming into the year. John Mechie, I think it was 7 catches, looking at the stat line, 45 yards, which I think for a player who's been talked about as a first-round NFL draft pick probably needs to get more separation and be more explosive. And that's a guy who I think they need more out of the rest of the year as well. And again, I think the bottom line for right now for the offense is just trying to become what they were before and trying to find the right players to do that.
Absolutely. And hey, let's pop up that video, Patrick, of Jameson Williams' run. Might as well watch it one more time. 100-yard kickoff return. And that's the first time that we've seen that since 2004. That was Pro Throw, right? That did that a while back.
Williams wants to bring it out. Got a seam. Got speed. Got touch at the 35, but stayed up. What a way to start the game. Touchdown, Alabama 100.
Yeah, that's a way to get the fans into it, and we'll get to that in a moment as well. But what I love what Williams said, and you obviously were there for this quote. He says, "I'm trying to go to the crib, no matter what play or what catch. I'm trying to go to the crib." So there you go. He's just he got there. He went to the crib, taking it to the house.
First time since Jalen Waddle in the Iron Bowl 2 years ago that they've had a kick return for a touchdown. And certainly, a nice thing against Southern Miss. Obviously, you're dealing with, lesser athletes on a team like that. That's a lower level group of 5 team with kind of the way things have gone, in Hattiesburg the last few years. And I don't know if you're going to be able to come out against SEC teams and outrun them quite the same way and have those sort of explosive plays. I mean, kickoff returns in general are just down because of, kickers' legs are stronger and you just don't see as many kickoff returns these days in football. So I don't know if you can rely on that sort of explosion going forward. Yeah, exactly. The fair catches, but
let's not go for that. But
but that's just that's the sort of player that they're kind of missing. Once you lose a guy like Waddle, and it seems like they found a replacement there.
All right, let's go to the defensive side of the football. Obviously, Alabama is going to be welcoming Ole Miss. 2:30 kickoff on CBS, and I imagine it's going to be a lively environment, an energetic environment. It's going to be a lot of fun. The big question is when you go up against this Ole Miss offense behind Matt Corral, a guy that is a heavy favorite right now in the Heisman race, what does this defense have to do really well in order to survive this one, which is perhaps the one game that we now, as we've gotten a sampling of 4 games, are all circling on the calendar, especially if you're an Alabama fan and you're an Alabama team?
Yeah, it's going to be getting off the field on third down. I mean, there wasn't a ton of issues on defense in the Southern Miss game, but that was one of them. I think there were 5 for 15 overall, and there was that third and long was more than 10 yards. I forget the exact yardage where Southern Miss converted and then scored a touchdown on the very next play, even the missed tackle from DeMarco Helms on that play. So as I think I wrote after the game, I mean, any sort of problem like that is going to only get magnified when you're dealing with a quarterback like Corral and, or like a play caller like Lane Kiffin, not a coordinator anymore. And he's a head coach. He's the head ball coach over there. And this is a big game for him, obviously. You talk about, the former Saban assistants. I think they're 23-0 now, but I would say this is probably one of the more dangerous times for a former assistant potentially beat Nick Saban, just with the way this defense has kind of been up and down so far this year, dealing with a veteran quarterback in Corral, who I think has shown he can put up points on this defense. And, they played better against Southern Miss than they did against Florida, but I just don't know if fans are going to be walking into Bryant-Denny on Saturday with the utmost confidence that they're going to be able to hold this Ole Miss offense to less than 35 or 40 points. It's still probably going to come down to how much this Alabama offense can rekindle what it had last year, which was certainly enough to win in Oxford. But, the balance, I think, has shifted a little bit where, Ole Miss's defense is better and Alabama's defense is not quite as Alabama's offense is not quite as consistent.
Yeah, and let's put this into perspective. Ole Miss did not have a game this week, so they've been just hanging out. They are going to come in well rested, I would imagine, and the nation's top-ranked offense as of right now. And then on top of that, you think about even to a season ago, this was the team that literally gashed up Alabama. For what was it over? It was almost 650 yards, and so.
Yeah. School record.
Keeping that in perspective. So I know certainly, as you mentioned, I think there will be a lot of nervous energy at Bryant-Denny Stadium this weekend, most certainly. Speaking of nervous energy, Nick Saban, he had a message for the fans last week. We heard him on his radio show, and he talks about this a lot when we go into these matchups, especially these lesser opponents. And, I love what he said about, you don't take winning for granted, right? Do not take winning for granted. And he kind of said, I don't want to be negative. And he gave some, I guess, used the example at Florida, of the fans that showed up and just the tone of how, all those fans showed up and were able to, bring over 90,000 fans, and basically saying like, I would appreciate everyone doing their part. And I love what he said specifically. He said, I'm a coach. I do this. I grow and develop these guys. So you guys do your part and show up and support our team, right? And so it's almost like in many ways, and he's done this before, but he really and truly put the onus back on the fans in this way by saying, I do my job, now you go do yours.
Yeah, you're right. I think he does kind of mention this coming into games like, these non-conference games where people just aren't going to get as fired up. But this did seem to be a little bit of a stronger plea from him. It's kind of at the end of his radio show, but his voice was getting higher and he started throwing in a few ites in there. Like it was Nick Saban mode.
Yeah.
And you could tell it was something that was getting under his skin a little bit, because he mentioned even in pregame radio show too on Saturday, saying that, you can't just pick and choose which games that you're going to get excited about as fans. And you need to kind of be up and get ready for each game. And I think he even mentioned that it was almost practice. You use that game as practice as fans for a game like it's coming up on Saturday for Ole Miss. And I think the overall vibe you just got from Saban last week was trying to make sure that the program wasn't slipping. Even though they've won 18 games in a row now, they're coming off a national championship. There's still just that grip that he seems to be trying to hold on to, where you could sense against Florida, maybe things weren't quite as dominant as they used to be. And then you have a Florida crowd that was affecting that game. And then, I think he was looking ahead and saying, why can't our own crowd do that? Or are our fans just so spoiled, essentially, that they can't get rowdy and get loud and make that a big time atmosphere where those games in September and October matter. Whereas I think, in his mind, maybe people were thinking early season game, like, let's just wait until January and see what Alabama does. And his mind, it's like, no, this game matters right now, the here and now. We can't be losing these games, and we can't just, like you said, take it for granted. So I think it was part of an overall message, not only to fans, but to his players as well, where they need to kind of uphold the level of play that they've had here for quite some time.
Yeah, and he's always good at that messaging. That always goes not only to the fans, to the players, and everyone kind of involved. And he said, like, why can't we, like, don't ever, like, he wants people to come into that stadium and say, like, this is the hardest place to play. And if I'm being honest, when people come to me and say, oh, what's the greatest stadium you've been in? There are other stadiums that I feel like I've been in, especially in specific situations. Penn State whiteout, Alabama played at Penn State. I went to that game, and I just remember early in my career being like, holy moly, like, this is crazy. So
right.
I do think that, there are a lot of places that do unique things and different things, and having that consistency, I think, is important. And you want teams to come in and say, holy crap, we've got to come play at Bryant-Denny Stadium. Like, this is a big deal.
Right.
And so I think you want to see that across the board, not just for the lower tier teams, but everyone across the board for every single game. So good stuff. Yeah.
I was going to say, just quickly, it's kind of the difference of being number one versus being not number one. And when you're number one, there's going to be nobody who's coming into your building that you're not expected to beat. And that's kind of the problem sometimes for Alabama, is that there's not that game where you, as a crowd, you feel like you need to be loud because you're trying to will your team to victory. You just kind of walk in and expect them to win. It's from covering the Patriots up in New England, it's the same way. I mean, the fans just kind of get apathetic a little bit because they always expect to win, and there's not that need to get rowdy and to be the 12th man, essentially.
Yeah, no doubt. Great insight. Appreciate it. Love all the notes from week 4 of the season. Now heading into week 5, Alabama up next against Ole Miss, number 1 versus number 12, Bryant-Denny Stadium, 2:30 kickoff. That game will be on CBS. Mike Rodak, we appreciate you. We'll check in again next week and beyond, but obviously all your updates, social media, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. I don't know. I don't even know if you're on Instagram, but wherever. We'll just say, we'll just say, what'd you say?
I'm not on TikTok.
Not on TikTok. Okay. Not on TikTok, but we'll check you out on social media. Obviously, you can go to AL.com for all the updates as well. And you can see there in the comments section kind of a recap of everything that happened. Appreciate you. And of course, we appreciate our producer, Patrick, hanging out. Patrick, can you show your face? I just want to show our people your face. Can you show your face real quick, my man? He may not be ready to punch up a 3 box.
I'm not ready for this, but
hi, there's Patrick. Woo woo. All right, Patrick, we appreciate you. Mike, we appreciate you. And thank you all for watching week 5. Have fun. Be safe out there. Peace.